Hello, hello, welcome. We're so glad folks are here. We're going to give people just a little bit of time to join here, but you've made it to Rally the Sector, Nonprofits and Election 2024. We're so glad that you're here. And we have some pretty fantastic speakers and guests for you today. All right. Welcome, 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 everyone. We're so glad that you're here. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. We're glad you're here. Welcome to Rally the Sector, Nonprofits and Election 2024 with Nonprofit Vote. In the next hour, you'll hear from community leaders just like you who are leading their communities to become more civically engaged. In many ways, this year might feel a little bit like a repeat of 2020, and that might bring up either anxiety or apathy for a lot of us. But we're here as nonprofit leaders to do what we always do, which is work to change the conversation, empower our communities, remind our communities that we have the power to do a lot of good when we rally together. After all politics are local, and we have hundreds of positions to elect across the country this year. So together, we can move from voter apathy to voter activation, but we need you. So welcome to Rally the Sector. Here's a little bit of what to expect as our flow for the next hour. After this welcome, I will turn it over to Nonprofit Vote's Executive Director, Brian Miller, who will give us the highlights of the Nonprofit Power Report. Spoiler alert, nonprofit leaders, we're making a difference in voter turnout, whether or not you realize it. So first, we're going to take a look at the report. So any data nerds out there, be on alert. And then we'll hear some stories from the field, real live examples about how voter engagement works in nonprofits, ranging from large to small with very different missions in 2 different parts of the country. And then next will be our keynote speaker, Vu Lei from Nonprofit AF, who will use his nonprofit leadership experience and wit to bring us all together before we close out with a call to action. So go ahead, get on the edge of your seat or your couch, your standing desk, treadmill, lawn chair, and let's get ready to rally the sector. I'm going to pass it on to Brian.
Hello, thank you, Gwen. And as Gwen noted, one of the big highlights that we wanted to lift up at the top of this meeting, this rally, is a report that we just came out with a couple of weeks ago, which really highlights the extraordinary power of nonprofits to make a big difference. And what this report essentially shows is the power of nonprofits to build a more inclusive democracy. And after analyzing voter file data from over 7,000 voters engaged by nonprofits across 8 states in the last midterm, we were able to document 2 really compelling core findings. The first is that nonpartisan voter engagement by nonprofits significantly boosts turnout. We showed a 10 percentage point boost turnout overall. That percentage turnout boost jumps to 12, 15, 17%. For groups that are historically underrepresented, younger voters, communities of color, low-income voters, had even the greatest gain of that voter engagement work. The second data finding isn't entirely shocking, but that the communities reached by nonprofits are significantly more likely to be younger, lower-income communities of color, and those very same communities. So which gives nonprofits sort of a 1-2 punch. One, your target demographic is exactly who's underrepresented in the communities, and your nonpartisan voter engagement significantly boosts turnout. And, why is this important? Because we all know, we've all seen the data that gaps in voter turnout along the lines of race, income, and age. And these gaps have a profound impact on our democracy and the policy debates that flow from it. These gaps also diminish the influence of the nonprofits serving the communities. So for the nonprofits, it's both in their mission interest of uplifting the communities they serve, but also in their self-interest of being able to be more effective at delivering their mission, advocacy, advocating for funding for their programs, whatever. They're going to have more clout when the communities they serve are participating. And now there's a lot of discussion about why we have gaps in voter turnout, and things like voting rights legislation, election policy do impact voter engagement. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but it's not the primary driver. Because we know that's because we see these gaps are present in even the most voter-friendly states that do everything right. They've got, same-day registration, automatic voter registration, go down the line. They check all the boxes, or at least most of the boxes. They still have gaps because these gaps are fueled by bigger structures. They're fueled by historic gaps in political alienation, people feeling like their opinion doesn't matter, and importantly, who is and is not being contacted about elections. And what a lot of folks think, oh, it's the political parties and the candidates, they're supposed to be the ones doing voter engagement. Yeah, they do. But the problem is they have a very different motivation. The motivation for a campaign is not to foster an inclusive electorate. Their goal is to win an election. And so they're going to make strategic choices. They're going to focus their contact exclusively almost on people with a history of voting, right? And the problem with that is that there's people out there who don't vote for whatever historical reasons. They haven't voted in the past. Because they haven't voted in the past, they're labeled as an unlikely voter, which means campaigns aren't going to contact them. Not being contacted, they're not going to vote, and they're going to be labeled unlikely again. And this cycle is going to keep repeating itself. And which is why we need nonprofits. We need a new civic ecosystem that engages and brings not all voters into the political process. And we believe, and the data in this report really shows, that nonprofits can have a profound impact on this. Nonprofits have the trust, they have the cultural competency, they have deep long-term roots in the communities that they serve. They're not just parachuting in come election cycle. And importantly, again, contrasting with those political campaigns, the motivation of a nonprofit engaging their community is fundamentally different, because it's not a short-term, we need to win this election goal. The goal of a nonprofit is to ensure their community has a seat at the table, whether they have a voting history or not. And that fundamentally different motivation leads to a fundamentally different outcome. And the research, again, going back to what this report shows that it does work. And when we did that analysis of the voter file data, what we showed is that overall, 56% of the voters that were engaged by the nonprofits in the program voted. That's compared to 46% of demographically comparable voters in the same communities. So we're really looking at a 10 percentage point boost in turnout, which is huge. But even more, that turnout boost, as I noted earlier, is even bigger among particular groups. Particularly people of color voters saw a 12 percentage point boost, the largest among that being among Black voters, who saw a 13 percentage point boost when engaged by nonprofits. And there's again, as I mentioned, when political campaigns do their targeting, they use this thing called propensity score. And it's, they use some computer modeling and whatnot, and they look at people's previous voting history, et cetera. And then they find populations that are more likely to vote. Campaigns are pretty much going to target people on the mid to upper end of this spectrum. The people on the bottom end of these propensity scores aren't going to get contacted by nonprofits. And what our data shows is that when nonprofits engage those lower propensity voters, that's where you see the biggest gain. That's where you see the 12 percentage point gains or more. And again, very similarly, when we look at lower income voters, those earning between 20 and 30,000, we saw a 15 percentage point boost. When we look at younger voters, those 18 to 24, we saw a 14 percentage point boost. And these are the kind of numbers we're seeing coming out of this analysis. So we know nonprofits are tremendously impactful when they do this nonpartisan voter engagement work. And so the next real question is who out here is doing the voter engagement work? And this is one of the things that we want to change. There's a totally separate report we came out a couple of years back using some Urban Institute data, and they did a survey of nonprofits across the country. And now this includes arts associations, libraries, health centers, food pantries, advocacy groups, and more. And basically, 1 in 5 nonprofits did voter engagement work with the communities that they served. However, what we found is compelling is that when you look at nonprofits that specifically serve low-income communities or communities of color, it jumps to about 1 in 3 are doing voter engagement work. We also saw that nonprofits doing particular types of programs like job training, housing assistance, community health centers were also a bit more likely to do voter engagement work. And even more telling, when you look at nonprofits that are led by people of color, BIPOC-led nonprofits with either majority BIPOC boards or CEOs of color, it's almost half of those nonprofits are doing voter engagement work, basically 40 to 50%. And that tells me a lot about who is really pushing the envelope on this issue. And so we as Nonprofit Vote really want to support those nonprofits that are doing this work. And we want to encourage those that aren't doing this work to get with the program and start building out voter engagement programs for their nonprofits. And to do that, we offer a myriad of services for nonprofits. We have free national webinars, which we do on everything from staying nonpartisan to building out a voter engagement program for your nonprofit. We have a resource library with free tools, templates, fact sheets, talking points you can take to your board when you want to make the case to them. We also offer tailored support for partner organizations. Gwen, who's emceeing this webinar, does a lot of work with groups like Feeding America, National Low Income Housing Coalition, YMCA, YWCA, to help them build out voter engagement toolkits and campaigns. We do run a multi-state field program, which is where the data from this report comes from. And we have 2 other initiatives called the Philanthropy for Voter Engagement Initiative, which really gets foundations to step up and invest. And finally, we are, of course, the managers of National Voter Registration Day. And that will be September 17th this year. And we hope everyone gets signs up for that, host an event on National Voter Registration Day. But don't stop there. Keep doing GOTV, keep doing registration and everything all the way up to Election Day. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Gwen.
Thank you so much, Brian. If you're not pumped up, if you're one of the data nerds that I love with all of my heart, and you're not pumped up by that, then I don't know what's going to do it for you. Thank you so much for sharing the results of the Nonprofit Power Report. And that, again, is linked in the chat if you want to dive a little deeper into that. So next up is stories from the field. We wanted to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to learn in the different ways that you learn. And so we have 3 fantastic speakers here that are going to share some stories of what this looks like in practice, right? Not just the data. The data shows us that it works. But how does it work? What does that look like? So I'm going to pass it next to Osvaldo Grimaldo, who is the Civic Engagement Coordinator at the Houston Foodbank. Osvaldo believes that by emphasizing the connection between access to food and engaging in the electoral process, his efforts contribute to advancing the Houston Foodbank's vision of a world that doesn't need food banks, which can only be achieved through community members' active involvement in the voting process. Let's welcome Osvaldo.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Gwen, for that awesome introduction. I would first like to thank, Nonprofit Vote for hosting, this awesome webinar and for their power report. That report is key in mobilizing and empowering us as nonprofits to make an impact in this election cycle. So, as the Houston Food Bank, how do we get involved in this work? How do we, see, it be fruitful in the work that we do as a food bank? Well, we surveyed our community members, the individuals that are in the distribution lines seeking our services. And when we asked them about their top 10 priorities on issues, voting did not make the cut. And that is an issue that we saw that we could help combat as our work as the largest food bank, in the US. So how do we get our services out to the communities? We have an extensive partner network made up of 1,600 organizations that could be your brick and mortar food pantries, mobile distribution sites, multi-service centers, communities of faith, and majority of them are nonprofits themselves. So that is how we get our work out into the communities as a food bank. And when we met with our community members, we learned, oh, our partner network, these entities that are in the front line serving our communities, they're the ones that see the need for this service. What we identified through our partner network and from our neighbors is that these individuals don't know the do's and don'ts of the voting process, the steps of going into a voting center, but most importantly, we identified that a lot of them didn't even know there was an election going on. So when we took this information to our partner network, we've identified that it is crucial for us to engage in these efforts in order to make the vision of the food bank become a reality. This cannot be accomplished without the participation of our neighbors in this voting process. And as you see on the map on our slide, we serve an 18 county service area, and that is made up of such a diverse pool of individuals, organizations going from urban here in Harris County. I know some of y'all are here today in this webinar to a very rural county as well. So our approach differentiates in the areas that we're in, and that's where I go into the 4 roots of our strategy as a Houston Food Bank. So when we heard from our neighbors, we learned we must be inclusive in this work and in this space. When we go up to someone and we speak about voting, if they clarify that they're ineligible to vote, we should not single them out of the conversation. We should make them included, because at the end, advocacy doesn't limit itself to any individual. And then we also learned that there's a huge education gap, as we've all identified in this space. How I said earlier, a lot of the individuals that we surveyed and we spoke to shared that they're indifferent about voting, or they don't know the steps of the process. And that's why education is one of our main roots in this work. We want to educate individuals to facilitate the voting process for them as much as we can. But most importantly, outreach and engagement. We must have strategic outreach that will align with the communities that we serve, but we must also engage in the conversation as often and as much as we can, no matter there's an election or not. And this will help develop confidence in the individuals that we're serving in the food bank. So they're, 1, a more confident voter, but 2, so they could see that we care. We care about their well-being by providing the service that they need, which is food. But we also care enough to make them sustainable in the voting process as well, since we understand that it is a very daunting process for many. And with these roots, we share it with our partner network, these nonprofits that have also shared with us that capacity has been a main issue in this work. They stated that they would love to do this work, which is voter engagement, but they see these barriers. This is where we sat down with our partner network and we went down the line and saw, okay, what do we hear most? We hear of capacity. How do we not make capacity a barrier, since we know that this work is very diverse? And that's when we learned that we hold a lot of trust in our communities. As nonprofits, our community members either seek our services or depend on us to a certain extent because they have trust in our work and our mission and the work that we do. So that helps combat, that capacity barrier that our network told us. We saw, okay, trust. What else can we do to facilitate voter engagement? Well, let's make this supplemental. Let's make voting the cherry on top into what we are already providing, just so it doesn't limit, 1, our partner network, but 2, our neighbors to one simple thing. And lastly, catering to communities. As I said, we serve such a diverse population that we know that one approach in one certain area wouldn't work in the other. And this is where we take trust to our advantage and have developed materials that essentially have the Houston Food Bank's logo on it, because we know that there's a lot of misinformation out there, whether online or information being given out to community members. So we learned that if they see that document and they see the Houston Food Bank's branding on it, they know that it's coming from a trusted entity and from a trusted organization that cares about their well-being. But how are we doing this, you might ask? We're not doing this by ourselves. We're working with a lot of other stakeholders in our area that provide these services directly. We go into this space with the mentality that as a food bank, we're not the pros in voter engagement, but the pros are you all. Those nonprofits that specifically work in civic engagement and voting. So we collaborate with these nonpartisan organizations to get these services out. And how might we do that, you might ask? We do it through these 2 initiatives. So we have our Civic Hub initiative. What that is having our food bank partners that are ramped up and ready to get this work going and have them become a Civic Hub, which is essentially a one-stop shop for all things voting, whether it is having voter registration being conducted every single time they have a food distribution drive or their pantry is open, to providing nonpartisan voter guides, to sample ballots, to voter ID clinics to help our neighbors, receive an ID in accordance with Texas, election laws. So we do this with relationship building. We've built relationships with the League of Women Voters, vote writers, our local county elections administration divisions, and that is how we get this work out into our communities. As a nonprofit, let's see the communities that we serve and how could we best cater to them and meet them in the middle. And our another initiative is our From the Food Box to the Ballot Box. We also know that our partners shared about capacity, and some of them might not have the ability to become a civic hub. We will also provide these materials to them that will offer them to do passive activities that won't really require much from their end, but will still engage our community members in the conversation and show that we cared. Here today, I came to speak to you all about, so us as nonprofits cannot see our capacity, as a limit, but rather see the trust that we have in our communities to combat that. I'd like to finish off, with my final slide is that it takes one. I love this saying because it takes one simple conversation to engage our community members and make them feel safe and heard in the voting process. You never know. You could also always be the first person to register that individual to vote or even tell them that the election is going on. So let's take this motto and go on for this election season, that it just takes one person, one conversation, one registered voter to make a change in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Osvaldo. It takes one. That's such a great reminder to stick with us, and I think we'll hold on to that as we go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next, I want to welcome the dynamic duo, Erika Anthony, Executive Director of Cleveland Votes, and Selina Pagan, who is the Executive Director of Cleveland's Young Latino Network. Erika and Selina have worked closely with a wide array of partners to build creative, culturally specific, and incredibly powerful initiatives to build a more inclusive and equitable democracy in Cleveland. And so many folks here I admire so, and they are very high on that list. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Erika and Selina. Take it away.
Awesome. Good afternoon. Not Osvaldo having me want to move to Houston to come help him out. Thank you so much for that great presentation and just providing. I took a couple of notes myself, so thank you for the inspiration. Thank you, Nonprofit Vote, for creating the space this afternoon. We say, oh, it's an important election year, but every year is an important election year. So it's so exciting to have so many people signed up for this webinar. Whether it's a refresher for you or this is, your first time out in the rodeo, there's space for you on either side of the spectrum. Even us OGs, can always create space to learn a new trick. I've been joking with my team lately. They've gotten me into Canva. And so, we all have to add new tools to our tool belt. So super excited to be with you all this afternoon. And incredibly honored to be here with my comrade, Selina, who I'll give space to introduce herself.
Buenas tardes o buenos días. Not sure what time zone everyone's in. I know we're all over the place, but my name is Selina Pagan. I am the Executive Director of the Young Latino Network here in Cleveland, Ohio. Also a very proud Boricua that was born and raised in Cleveland. Very excited to talk more about our work and the power of collaboration across communities of color, which has been so fruitful for us here in Northeast Ohio. Thanks again, Nonprofit Votes, for having us, and I'm gonna turn it right back to you, Erika.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Selina. All right, so we're gonna jump in. We have a case study that we're gonna show you here in a moment, but before we get in here, I know we heard some amazing information from Brian at the top of the call. If folks have not had a chance to jump into that report, please do. It's one that myself and my team dig into annually. It really helps to ground us and give us some new insights for the constituents and folks that we want to serve here in Cleveland's community. But at a broad stroke, Cleveland Votes, I didn't say, I'm the executive director, also the co-founder. So have been around obviously for some time, but just broadly have worked in the community in various capacities. And most of my career since grad school has been in the nonprofit sector. And so whether that's community development, economic development, advocating for safe return for those coming back from incarceration. And so as a result of that, and of course the work here at Cleveland Votes, I've learned a tremendous amount. And what you'll see here in a moment is that doing that in collaboration is top of the list for me. There's no one person that can have all the knowledge, all the insights, all the information, right? And these issues are complex, right? And we know they're complex because we're trying to undesign systems and structures that have been in place for far too long. And that's not a one-stop, boom, 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 and you're done and you can move on to the next person. So nonprofits have a really unique position. They're either, brick and mortar nonprofits where I started. I worked at a social service nonprofit providing behavioral health services and mental health services, right? So there was an existing base, right? For those that are organizers, if you're doing organizing at large, you hear about, creating your base, increasing your base, right? But if you're a nonprofit, you more often not already have an existing base because you either have constituents or clients that are being served by your institution. So the next really major thing is thinking about how do I lean into that network, right? How do I lean into those that already are within my sort of immediate circle, right? We all have kind of different concentric circles that surround us. But we always recommend for folks, start at home, right? Start with the staff that works at your organization. Let's not assume that folks have the information and the tools that they need. Start with your board. And then again, if you're a client serving organization, think about the clients and constituents. If you're a neighborhood-based organization, think about the footprint that you're in and whether or not there's ways to better inform and educate those individuals. At the end of the day, we have to build trust, right? And that takes time. We can't expect us to fly into communities and come in with our agenda and think that they're going to want to hear us and listen to us. Many of us, most of us are carrying a lot in our day-to-day lives, right? And so thinking about how you foster that relationship, foster that trust, it's really important. And that's why we say, this year is important, but every year is important. If we only think and come into communities in this transactional manner, then we're going to get transactional results back to us, right? They're not going to want to be in deep relationship with us. The other important thing, and in a second here, I'm going to show this brief video, is that we all have to have plans. And if you haven't went to Nonprofit Votes resource library, please go there. They make it really easy for you. While I've been doing this for a while, I still find myself coming back to that resource library just to make sure that we have the most current and up-to-date information. And so plans are critical to our work, but we also have to be willing to adapt, right? We all unfortunately experienced the same thing 4 years ago when we learned about this time, about COVID and sort of what that meant for our health and for our lives and our communities. And so when you think about your plans, we don't want to have tunnel vision either, right? We don't want to, this is what I want to do. This is what my organization is charged to do, but not think about the environment and the atmosphere that is around you and fellow community members to make sure that you're adapting accordingly. Lastly, before I start the video, I'll just note that, it's really important to think about democracy beyond elections, right? We have generally, 2 elections per year, depending on what your state is and where you're at. But there's a lot of time in between those elections, right? We just had our March primary election here in Ohio about 2 weeks ago. And it's a long stretch till we get to November. So if we only engage folks leading up to March primary and then said, all right, we'll see y'all in November, well, that's not helpful, right? That's not adding to the ecosystem and building a stronger ecosystem. So the video that I'm about to show is a collaborative effort that included our organization, Young Latino Network, and many others in Cleveland during the 2020 election cycle.
We say we're all in this together, but how do we show that? We make sure
every person counts.
Every person counts.
Everyone counts.
Every child counts.
Every senior citizen counts.
Every mask counts.
Every meal counts.
Every voice counts.
Every community.
Every community counts.
So as you can see, look, Osvaldo, our food bank was in this video. We are two organizations, along with many others. We're not only mobilizing folks and educating them about the presidential election in 2020, we were also deeply involved in the 2020 census, and doing that in the midst of a global pandemic, right? And we had to get really innovative, very creative, in thinking of strategies and the ways in which, we would still reach people, with the first priority being ourselves and our own health, right? We were really cognizant of making sure that our respective teams had the proper PPE. And while we weren't doing a tremendous amount of work in the external space, we were doing a lot more digital engagement. There still were times that we needed to be out and engaging with our community. But we also got innovative in the strategies in which we were communicating with people. Many of us, did have to ramp up our digital capacity, which, I'll say for Cleveland Votes at that time, we were baby stepping, right? We were just starting to kind of get our wings and increasing our digital capacity. And so we really had to fast track that. Because again, going back to the point about adapting your plans, while we all walked into that year with our plans and feeling confident about what we were going to do, those plans were turned on its head. But I want to turn it over to my comrade here so you can hear more about the work we did that year.
Thank you, Erika. A little history, a real quick synopsis of our history as the Young Latino Network is that we've been around since 2002. That was way before my time. And this is an organization that was founded as a young professionals networking group, but was always grounded in civic engagement and leadership development. And so I think part of our story as the Young Latino Network is our evolution as an organization and the way we have come up since 2020, because at that time we had no staff. It was completely volunteer led. And the way we've evolved as an organization to really ground ourselves in ensuring equitable access to the ballot for our community has transformed and evolved the way we view this work in such a powerful way for our community, especially as communities of color and organizations that are led by people of color. And so during 2020, around this time, I think maybe a few weeks early in March, when Erika and the Cleveland Votes team had some of the democracy partners on a call, I happened to be scrolling on Facebook and seeing a caravana taking place in Puerto Rico at the time, which is very traditional in Latin American countries, where you have someone in a big old pickup truck with a booming loudspeaker just traveling around the neighborhood, whether they're selling pan or they're telling you about the fiestas patronales en el pueblo, like they're coming to share messages, right? And so I happened to see that video. I think it was an older video, but I'm like, hey, y'all, pause real quick on this Zoom call. What do you think if we do a caravana in the neighborhood? And so it was at a time where we were already on lockdown, and it was our way of getting to the people when we knew that when folks were at home, right? And they were locked, like we were shut down essentially. And so we knew that the primary election in 2020 was moved, and there was no way to really get that information out at public events or community gathering spaces. And so the work that we got to do in 2020 with the caravanas was magical. It was so many lessons learned, and it was tapping into our culture and our identities to just meet the people where they are. And that was so powerful. And we were seen and we saw community in a way that was so resilient and powerful on how we can engage folks. And it took a very big collaborative effort across communities of color to get this work done. So we partnered with our local radio station, La Mega. We partnered with Cleveland Votes and a lot of other community organizations to get a caravan of vehicles lined up in our parking lot here in the Clark Fulton neighborhood, and drive around, passing out vote by mail applications and passing out any information that we had at the time. The caravanas continued to evolve as we hosted them, and we realized how our communities of color were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, which led to us including a lot of information around COVID. There was a lot of misinformation happening. And so in our caravanas, we distributed PPE kits and handouts of information to the community members, and would do voter registration drive-through pop-ups to safely distribute supplies. But that wouldn't have been possible without the support of Cleveland Votes and other democracy building orgs that were supporting our organization. Beyond this networking component and community building, it took a village. And so this effort on top of it was a census year, and talking about census to communities that just don't trust a lot of these systems, rightfully so. There's a lot of issues in our communities that we haven't even like dove into the way we should. It was a lot. It was a heavy lift. And nonprofit workers during this pandemic were a blessing to so many communities because we didn't stop, right? We kept going no matter what for our people. It was a lot of late nights, a lot of heavy lifting, but our folks did it. And that was really powerful, the way our work evolved and how it's transformed democracy building work through nonprofit organizations since that pandemic. Erika, I'm gonna turn it back to you. What else do we got?
Yeah, I think that's it. There's one more slide in here that folks can check out that just, really just elevates again this importance of culture. Many years ago, we had a group come to us at Cleveland Votes who wanted to engage our Latinx friends and family, and they did not identify that way. And my first question to them was, well, have you engaged with the organizations that are already operating and servicing that particular community? And it doesn't mean that if you don't identify that way, you can't be in relationship and you can't be in service too. But there's a respectability, right? And so there is a beautiful, sort of blend of folks that make up Cleveland. And we have our own individual identities, but we share values, and that is what connects us. And so part of why we're able to work really well together is, we bring our assets to the table. We are a grant maker as well. And so we were able to support organizations like YLN and many others that year. And at the same time, learn from Selina and her leadership and the team's leadership, and figuring out ways that we could adapt and really, again, be in service to our community that year. So with that being said, please check us out. I know Travis is dropping tons of links in the chat here, but this is our contact information. And I think we're all really excited to hear our next speaker. So I will turn it back over to Gwen.
Thank you so much, Erika and Selina. There is so much to get from, and I know we could do entire webinars with each of you. So I'm so grateful for your sharing. So next, our keynote speaker, we have Vu Lei of Nonprofit AF. Vu is a writer, speaker, vegan, Pisces, and the former executive director of RVC, a nonprofit in Seattle that promotes social justice. By developing leaders of color, strengthening organizations led by communities of color, and fostering collaboration among diverse communities. I know I first learned about Vu when I was working at United Way in Lorain County, and just starting to think about the movement and the systems that are in place that serve certain folks in our communities, and nonprofits are often the ones that are kind of filling in those gaps. And so it was really inspiring to me and helpful to me and empowering to me to read his work. And I'm so grateful to be able to amplify his work here today. So thank you so much, Vu. I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Gwen. Hi, everyone. This is Vu. I use him pronouns, and I am calling in from Seattle, which is on Duwamish and Coast Salish land. For colleagues who are blind or have low vision, I am a mid-aged Asian man with a pervasive aura of vegan sexiness. And also, I just ate like half a bag of chocolate chips for lunch, so I'm kind of hyped up about it, right? But so thank you so much, Nonprofit Votes, for having me. First of all, I just want to acknowledge just how amazing everyone is on this call. You are here because you care about this issue, and I really appreciate you. I just, in general, really appreciate nonprofits. I always say that we are like air, whereas other people are, other sectors are like food, and people can see food, so they call themselves foodies. They take pictures of food and etc. But the work that you all do in your various different missions is a lot like air, and no one really appreciates it until it's gone, until they really need the air. So thank you, before anything, just for all the work that you do in allowing our communities to breathe. And our sector is pretty amazing. We are so creative over the past several years during the pandemic. We've been so creative and pivoting and just doing incredible work with everything going on. And I'm just very proud of us. And at the same time, we've been dealing with so many challenges in our sector, including the focus on overhead or the lack of funding, funders who need their special unique snowflake grant applications and reports, whiny donors that we have to suck up to all the time, etc. It's been a lot. And in the meanwhile, there's been a significant increase in the demands for our services due to the pandemic and the general failure of our systems. And we've been really great at responding and doing everything that we can. There's a lot of very dedicated people in our sector. And at the same time, I think it's not tenable anymore, y'all. Okay, we just can't keep going this way, right? This election that's coming up is vital and it is terrifying. And it's not just the national election, but everywhere. There's just been terrible things happening, policies being passed, voter suppression laws, etc., in Georgia and everywhere. And I feel like I kind of feel like we are the Avengers as a sector. We're like the Avengers fighting Thanos, right? The Thanos of poverty and racism and injustice. And we're trying to assemble. We're trying to fight. And unfortunately, our sector's response hasn't always been really great, right? Like if we were the Avengers and we're trying to fight Thanos, like Iron Man, who represents philanthropy, is like, I'm only going to give out 5% of my money to fight Thanos because I'm saving up the other 95% in my endowments to fight future Thanoses, right? And Captain Marvel is like, I know what we need to do. We should like form a think tank that will study who would be most likely to be killed by Thanos. And then 2 years later, they release a white paper that says, guess what, everyone? It's people of color and disabled people and LGBTQIA and trans folks and etc. who will be most likely to be affected by Thanos. And everyone's like, yay, that's amazing. Okay, we gotta stop all this. I think one of the ways that we can fight the Thanos of injustice and inequity and racism and poverty and homelessness and everything is if we start really engaging at the systems level. And one of those things that we need to do is engage people to vote. All right, we just cannot keep going down this path where we burn out trying to play the Hunger Games and respond to the symptoms of injustice. We need to organize and do things differently. And voter engagement is one of those critical things that we all must do. And this is why I'm so grateful for Nonprofit Votes and other organizations that are leading the charge. And it's time for us all to step in. I think that we have an amazing sector and we don't realize just how powerful we are. We are the third largest sector. We are 10% of the workforce. We contribute about 7% of the GDP every year, right? But for a long time, we've been taught that it's mission creep for us to do things like engage in voter engagement and civic engagement and so on. Like, it is not mission creep to engage in this work. I think it's probably one of the most important things our sector can do that all of us should be doing. Voter engagement should be a hallmark of our sector, and we should all be doing it. Getting people to vote is something we must all do. It is not partisan. All right. It is something that we just, as a sector, needs to be doing. It's one of the most effective ways for us to address the inequitable systems that affect all of the issues that we care about, whether it's homelessness, the environment, or the arts, or youth development, or immigration. And I know there's been that increase in demands for our services, and that made some of us think that we shouldn't be doing more voter engagement work or civic engagement work. I think it's the opposite. We need to be doing more of it right now. Right? This is how we ensure an equitable democracy where our constituents' voices matter just as much as those who have more privilege. So we have a role to play. As we saw in the reports, people love us doing this work. They trust nonprofits to do this work, and they're more likely to vote when nonprofits engage them, no matter what their missions are. So let's ramp up our efforts. I want us to own our power as a sector, and I want us to have this audacity of ambition, right? I think that in some ways we've been trained to think like very small, like we can only do this, we only respond to the symptoms, we can be very incremental. And I want us to just be audacious. I want us all to just to ask for more funding and to demand it. and around everything, and be audacious around voter engagement and civic engagement. As Brian said, 20% of nonprofits are doing voter engagement work, which is amazing that 1 out of 5 is doing that. But I think we need and we can get this number to 100%. I think 100% of nonprofits should be doing this type of work, this voter engagement work, right? And we need to demand funding to do this, right? National Voter Registration Day should be like Giving Tuesday. We should all participate in it, all of us. And we should all have PTO days for staff to vote and to volunteer around this work. I am really excited about this work, and I appreciate you all. Yes, I'm a little bit terrified what will happen in November, but I'm also optimistic that our sector will use its full strength to rally our community and to vote across all levels of government. Let's tackle systemic injustice and advance an equitable society. Let's punch Thanos in the face and put ourselves out of business. And I'm just appreciative of you all. And I'm going to turn it over to Gwen to talk about some actions we can take. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Vu. We will assemble with all of our tools and everything. There's a lot of analogies here to go with this. So I love it. Thank you so much for that rallying call. And so you've seen the data, right? Brian shared the data. You've heard the stories from Osvaldo, from Selina, from Erika, and you've gotten the inspiration and the kick and the reminder that Thanos is there, the Thanos of injustice and racism and all of those things. So, and you have the tools. We're here as Nonprofit Vote. We are here to give you the tools that you need and help you co-create the tools that you need to make this happen. I know that many of you are coming to this event here in the middle of your workday. You'll leave here and you'll be faced with maybe a line of clients, a pile of paperwork, a growing email inbox. And we heard from Osvaldo, and we also know that as nonprofit staff, it takes capacity to do this work. And that takes planning. And so we want to be sure that we're also next to you, alongside you, as we do this work together. So we've created a pledge. And this is our next step, is to take this pledge. What will happen when you take this pledge is you will be added to our list that will get an email, not too often. We're not going to bombard you, but once or twice a month, that will have resources for you. So resources, philanthropy for voter engagement, nonprofit staff vote, resources like timelines and like scripts for how to talk to voters or potential voters, resources like what to do with rural voters, right, in rural areas, how to reach different communities. So all kinds of tools. So we're encouraging you to take this pledge, and what that will do is encourage others. We're going to gather together, we're going to band together like the Avengers, and vote and encourage our communities to vote. We know that that is just one of the tools that is in our tool bag, and we can use all of those tools at the same time because we are magical unicorns who can do that. So whether you are planning to simply amplify voting information from your local board of elections, or incorporate voter registration into your intake forms, whether you want to host a candidate forum, or you are ready to have a caravana, we're encouraging you to take this pledge, and we'll be able to follow up with you and support you in all the ways that you need, hopefully in all the ways that you need, in all the ways that we can to support you. So that link to the pledge is going to be dropped in the chat here, but that's what we're encouraging you to do, is to take this pledge. That is our call to action, and we're so excited about seeing how many folks we can actually get to sign the pledge. We have over 300 people even on this webinar right now. And how amazing would it be if we could pull together even 200 of us, right, to take that pledge, to take the next steps, to be equipped and be energized and be ready to vote, because our future depends on it. And so thank you again to our wonderful speakers, Selina, Osvaldo, Erika, Brian, and Vu. And thanks to generous support from our network of democracy champions. All of these tools are provided to you for free. If you'd like to support our efforts to engage more nonprofits and foster this more inclusive democracy in 2024 and beyond, you can donate to Nonprofit Vote today. Your support's greatly appreciated. But also please use the resources. Our resource library exists. We're updating it all the time. Soon we'll have state guides for running voter registration drives, and all kinds of other tools ready for you. So we will rally this year, and we will rally our sector together to make a difference and to build a more equitable democracy, because it is crucial to our future. So thank you so much for being a part of that work, for doing all of the work that you all are doing as nonprofit leaders to build our democracy, to build our communities, and ensure that they have the resources that they need. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, hands up as support and taking the pledge. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Take the pledge. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Go out and vote and change the world. Thank you. We'll see you next time.